Hey there retro fans, Games Apprentice back with another EVERCADE review. This week I'm going to be reviewing one of the only games that doesn't work on the EVERCADE versus the Namco Museum Collection 1. Are you home console fans dodging a bullet, or does this one really pack a punch? Namco, currently Bandai Namco Entertainment Inc., was founded in 1955 by Masaya Nakamura and Nakamura Seisakusho, originally a producer of coin-operated amusement rides throughout Japan. This business continued until they purchased the Japanese division of Atari in 1974. Namco quickly became one of the leading game companies in Asia, and this led to a raft of Namco-developed titles. The first of these was GB, followed by the first major hit, Galaxian, in 1979, and followed quickly by PacMan in 1980. PacMan became the most successful arcade game of all time. Namco Games has been ported to many consoles from 8-bit to current generation, but the heart and design of those original games is evident throughout. Namco Museum Collection 1 combines some of the finest games Namco created and were ported to home consoles. This is Namco's opinion, not mine. So this is the first time I'm hearing about GB. Obviously PacMan's the most well-known game on this cart, but for historical purposes it would have been nice to see what GB is. It's not on the second collection either, which is a bit of a shame. Even if it's terrible, it's not like all the games on here come out swinging, so it'd have been nice to have that. So there's 11 games on this cart, which is pretty impressive. It's about half as many as on the previous carts, but it's still a good quantity of games. But again, let's find out if it's quantity or quality. I'll be ranking them from worst to best as always. Number 11, Dig Dug. Dig Dug brought colour and humour to a period of heavily blacked screened games about spaceships and battles. Dig Dug is a digging game that involves moving around the play area, infiltrating your enemies until they pop or crushing them under rocks. It's basically PacMan, except you make your own routes, and instead of eating ghosts, you make objects fall on them. Or if you run out of objects, you just endlessly run away from them. Good job at ripping off your own franchise, Namco. Honestly people, what am I missing with Dig Dug? It's probably Namco's third most well-known old-timey arcade franchise, but I just don't get the appeal at all. I can only assume digging was massive in the 80s. Number 10, Xevious. Xevious was hugely popular in Japan, where it's one of the first games to feature a boss fight and have an overarching story. The game was originally designed to have a helicopter theme, but due to the science fiction boom at the time, it was changed to a space theme instead. You play a starship known as Solvalu and attempt to destroy the Xevian forces. Xevious' success led to the creation of several sequels and spin-offs, strategy guides, literature, soundtrack albums, and even an animated feature film. This game is basically the most basic of top-down shoot-'em-ups. There are probably worse shoot-'em-ups that exist, but they're not taking up space on an EVERCADE cart. Xevious is slow-paced, your main enemy seems to be floating rings. It's lacking anything that makes games from this genre any fun. It's 40 years old, which means it's no doubt down to the technology of the time, but unless you're Japanese or over 45, you're probably not going to see what all the fuss is about here either. Number 9, Quad Challenge. Ready for some adrenaline-soaked split-scene racing action? Rev your engine, pull your throttle, and hit the dirt with Quad Challenge. Race one of the 4 high-powered quad bikes on 16 different mud-soaked tracks. Quad Challenge is odd in its initial design, as it plays showing both you and your opponent in split screen. It's a good thing it does too, because this detracts away from how devoid of detail the screen is. Other than the occasional bush and a bale of hay and cool moving background, there's not really much to look at. It's a decent racer, made a bit more unique in the fact that you've got to switch between low and high gear to maximise your speed. The design though is just a bit too simple for this to be anything special. Number 8, Starluster. Starluster is a space warfare simulator. You will control Dan Hynek, a pilot of the starfighter Gaia, Your mission is to fight the evil being Batura and its minions who are trying to conquer the universe. The game is played from an inside the cockpit view, one of the first games to take this approach. Players select a location on their interplanetary map and warp to it, ready to battle the Batura. As one of the first games of its genre, Starluster is impressive, and it's also interesting how similar the games in that genre still feel today. Obviously graphically, they've come a long way, and there tends to be a lot more of them than just go to a destination and shoot some stuff. It's got first person, it's got a regenerating shield, and you can pick your own destination. It's crazy ahead of its time. Number 7. Battle Cars. The game is set in a post-apocalyptic world in which the sport of choice is a violent auto race called battle cars. You choose from 3 different vehicles and race across different zones. Upgrades can be purchased as you progress, fire missiles, grenades and spinning discs to eliminate your enemies. Battle Cars seems like a game that I would have played before. I love Super Mario Kart, Street Racer and F-Zero on the Super Nintendo. It feels a bit like those. Doesn't look like it ever got released in the UK, which would explain why I haven't heard of it. The main issue with Battle Cars though is that on a whole it feels unfinished. I was expecting it to be an unreleased prototype when I was playing it. The races don't even have any sort of countdown, they just randomly start. The fact that you're not racing against other cars, they're just there and you're racing against time is very odd for a game so focused around battling other cars. Other cars just sort of appear out of nowhere and you just shoot them out your way, and sometimes they become incredibly annoying. Not a terrible game, but it gets pretty old pretty quick. Number 6. Mappy. Mappy is a police mouse who seems to be obsessed with collecting valuables in a house before a gang of Meowskis can catch you. Obviously, the way to move around the house is by trampoline. Points are scored by recovering the valuable items, bouncing on a trampoline, putting cats in an impact wave, originally called microwave, and hitting cats with doors. Mappy was one of the first games to include side-scrolling action. Mappy is another game that's pretty similar to PacMan. You run around the screen getting all the collectibles and avoid the enemies. You're supposed to be a police mouse, but you definitely seem like you're stealing stuff, so perhaps Mappy is a bent copper. The fact that you can scroll left and right in a game that came out in 1983 is pretty impressive, considering most were either confined to one screen or at best you could just go right. I guess its main issue was the graphics. They're probably a couple of years out of date in the fast-paced world of 1980s arcade. Mario Brothers came out the same year, and that certainly looks more impressive than this. Number 5. Galaxian. Galaxian was one of the innovators in the established space shooter formula pioneered by Taito's Space Adventure. It was designed to give the players the feeling of being in a space war with fast-moving attacks and a starfield background. Much like the games before it, your ship faces alien enemies and your job is to shoot them out of the sky. Galaxian came before Galaga and was always seen as the less sophisticated but more challenging of the two. Galaxian was basically Namco's answer to the 1978 classic Space Invaders. The problem is that when they brought out a sequel, they called it Galaga instead of Galaxian 2 or Super Galaxian, which killed any chance they had of creating something iconic. I don't think PacMan would have quite been as recognisable an IP if instead of Miss Pac-Man they'd called the sequel Miss Pucky. Galaxian is definitely a superior game over Space Invaders though. It's in colour, it's more challenging with the randomness of the enemies flying at you, and most importantly, it still holds up as a fun arcade game. If I'm ever in an arcade and Galaxian or Galaga are there, they're the most likely Namco games I'm going to play. Number 4. Mappy Kids. You play as the son of Mappy, desperate to get to a wife but only able to do it if you're able to provide for your family. Mappy Kids features platforming action and mini-games along the way. Littered throughout the levels are chests and coins to help you accumulate a small fortune to please your would-be spouse. Once money is accumulated, you can buy furniture from the store to fill your house. Buying these items will prove that you're worth marrying. Mappy Kids was originally only released in Japan. We bring the first ever English translation to the EVERCADE console. The best thing about Mappy is that it led to Mappy Kids. And this is a really fun platformer. The only real issue with it is it's technically flickering and issues with the colour scheme. I'd imagine something like this on the Super Nintendo would have been pretty rad. In between levels you get random minigames such as red flag, white flag and spot the difference. These are nice little bonuses, although something to tell you what the controls are like you get in Mario Party would be handy. Overall though, Mappy Kids is a fun little gem and it really should have been released in the West, so more people could have played it. Number 3, PacMan. PacMan is a pop culture phenomenon. Developed in Japan in 1980, PacMan quickly became one of the most popular games of all time. It was designed by Toru Iwatani to be the antidote to the aggressive space shooters that dominated the markets at the time. PacMan involves moving around a maze and eating pack dots, scoring points as you progress, eating all available dots to move to the next level. Watch out for the 4 ghosts who will chase you around the maze. If they catch you, a life will be lost. The most famous game on the list still holds up over 40 years later. Can't imagine many newcomers wanting to play something like PacMan on the TV, but I'm sure most companies would dream of making a mobile game as good as this. PacMan is a perfect blend of easy to play but difficult to master score chasing. It's never as good with a D-pad as it was with a stick, but it's still undeniably playable. PacMan, you know what PacMan is. Number 2, Libble Rabble. Libble Rabble was one of the few games that genius designer Toru Iwatani designed after PacMan. It is an action puzzler that involves using the 2 arrows to surround the mushling characters. Once all the poles have been enclosed, they are harvested and the player can progress. There are a number of enemy characters that will try and stop you, which can also be defeated by closing the loop around them. Bonus stages involve surrounding chests with the loop to collect loot. The unique control scheme uses the D-pad to control one arrow, and the XYAB is used as a quasi D-pad to control the other arrow. This can be a bit of a head scratcher initially, but you will soon get used to it. This one almost made the number 1 spot, I was so close. I think the only thing that lets it down are the graphics and the colour scheme. I mean, it literally looks like garbage. If this game were a contestant on Britain's Got Talent, people would already be laughing before it even begun. But Libble Rabble is proof that innovative gameplay will beat out graphics any day of the week. In Libble Rabble, you've got to control 2 characters at once, one with each hand, and doing this messes with your brain so much, but once you get it down, you feel like some sort of ambidextrous god. The same concept was applied in the criminally underplayed and brilliant minigame Animal Crossing Sweet Day as part of the Nintendo Land package on the Wii U, and that's why it was criminally underplayed. It's a cool mechanic that we should definitely see more of. Check out Libble Rabble. Number 1, Metal Marines. The world has been decimated by war and divided up into many islands. Your job is to defeat the evil Zorgoof, who is trying to take over the world. You lead a military force whose main unit is the Metal Marine, a 50-foot tall mecha. Manage your resources and build up your army. The world is depending on you. If Metal Marines had come out on the Game Boy Advance instead of the Super Nintendo, I think it could have been a pretty successful IP. It feels a lot like Advance Wars, the presentation, the dialogue, and obviously the premise. It's a pretty straightforward real-time strategy game. You've got a base, the enemy's got a base, you launch attacks while also defending and managing your resources. You do this by building base defense to take down incoming missiles and opposition Metal Marines, while at the same time launching your own missiles and own Metal Marine pods. It's the perfect blend of simple and tactical that makes it very accessible. I'd never heard of Metal Marines before, but definitely worth checking out. So that's it. Overall, the collection is okay. There's nothing really that stands out as amazing, and there's not much in the way of duds. It's a fairly mediocre collection in general. For that reason, I'm going to score it 6.5 out of 10. So I hope this review's been helpful. I'm the Games Apprentice. As always, thanks for watching, don't forget to click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.